What's going on, Raider Nation? Welcome to Upon Further Review, brought to you by Coors Light, the guys that, the people that helped get Tom Flores into the Hall of Fame with the campaign a couple years ago. It's always good to have a prop on here. If the voice sounds different, the name is definitely different. I'm taking over for Eddie Pascal on the podcast, and it's as humbled, as honored as I am to try to fill those shoes that Eddie did such a great job on this show for so long. I'm just as excited to welcome my first guest. Voice of the Raiders, Jason Horowitz. And Jason, we were before we sat down, I was getting kind of in the mood listening to some Beastie Boys, and I was just thinking, Adam Horowitz, member of the Beastie Boys.
Not related.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
He went by Ad Rock. So I'm thinking from here on out, you're just straight up J-Rock.
That's fine. I mean, listen, if you'd like to have Kirk Morrison reference me as that, I mean, I've had other. Sean McDonough once called me Jay Horror, Jason Horowitz, right? I mean, you can throw in a lot of letters and names, whatever you want. But Adam Horowitz and I are not related, but I'd like to be.
Great documentary on them on Apple TV if you ever have a free minute. But I don't think you do, because you're all over the place, and now entering year 4 as the voice of the Raiders, you've seen a lot of change. And there's a little bit more change on the personal end for you in the broadcast booth this year. So before we start jumping into training camp and the obvious storylines of everything, I think we got to introduce kind of ourselves to the audience for this new format here. So again, some of the things you've seen change, but obviously there's another big change coming for you personally in the booth.
Well, you mentioned, and first and foremost, Lincoln Kennedy was a wonderful partner to have for the first 3 years. He, growing up in Michigan, and I've said this before many times on different Raider platforms, whether podcast or shows we do, I was not a Raider fan growing up in terms of like being a fan of the silver and black. I grew up in Michigan. I was a huge Barry Sanders fan. We've talked about all that. And, my relationship to the Raiders was how much I loved Bo Jackson and Marcus Allen on Tecmo Bowl as a little kid with video games, right? And Lincoln was, no pun intended, but he was the link between bringing me as an outsider in to love Raider Nation and being part of that last part of the Raiders that was, let's call it successful, right? I mean, the Raiders as a franchise from when this thing got going in 1960 to the Super Bowl that Lincoln and Rich Gannon and that group played in was as successful really as any franchise over that 40-year period. But in the 23 years since then, it's obviously been a struggle, and we all know that. But Link was the bridge for me to understand how important the alumni are to this franchise, how important the alumni and the current players are to the fan base, the love that is really just stronger than any fan base that this league has to offer, and he helped me see that, and he guided me through it, and and just from a symbolic standpoint, he's just this massive man, and so we'd walk into a stadium together, and I'd be like, oh, all right, I'm good. I've got the 6'7", 300 and some pound man walking next. Oh, he's lost a lot of weight the last few years though, but and so he was wonderful. But now I get to transition to a guy who grew up a Raiders fan in the Bay Area, who got a chance to be drafted by this franchise, played 5 years for this franchise, led the franchise in tackles, and someone I've worked with before. Kirk Morrison is wonderful, and he's going to be outstanding in the booth, and we're going to have a lot of fun together.
It's interesting, to kind of put the focus back this way a little bit. I wrote a book with Lincoln, and we graduated high school the same year, 1988. And I just
you guys ran the same wing tee offense.
But I'm glad that I played defensive end in high school. And there's no way I was going to try to get past the Oval Office himself. I can't even imagine playing against him because, like he and I, we were both band studs. I'm not going to say band geek. We both played trumpet in high school.
I was a band guy. Lincoln and I talked about that on the air before. I was a band guy.
What instrument did you play?
Well, so I played trumpet.
There we go.
Hold on a second. Right. Like I told you earlier, I can't trill my R's. I also couldn't play the trumpet very well, but I also never really practiced. And so they knew that, and in freshman or sophomore year of high school, they're like, listen, you don't play this well. You're going to transition to an instrument where all you have to do is do boom, boom, boom. So baritone. I wasn't good enough for tuba. They put me at baritone.
Same philosophy, though, being in the brass and playing the same mouthpiece, just bigger.
Yeah, that's right.
But but that's a cool thing. And then also, for me, I covered Kirk Morrison. I've been covering this team in one way or another since 2005. 2005, I left the Los Angeles Times, came to the Sacramento Bee to be the beat writer. And guess who the Captain Kirk was and who the middle linebacker was? And the one thing I always loved about Kirk was he was always so effervescent. He was always so positive. And even as a UNLV alum, you had to give the San Diego State product his props because he always, they'd come off a bad loss with Kerry Collins, Randy Moss, Lamont Jordan, Derek Burgess, and there was Captain Kirk. 10-6 is still out there.
Yeah.
9-7 is still out there. 8-8 is still out there. So it's going to be unique to hear the transition. And Lincoln's still involved with studio shows and things. So it's going to be great to hear his perspective. But from you, bouncing things off of him in a broadcast, I'm sure seeing a game from an offensive lineman standpoint, where it's coming from the line of the trenches out to where a middle linebacker sees things, I'm sure is going to be
well, it'll be different. And, Kirk and I have never called a regular game together before, and we will here in the preseason on TV, and then we'll transition to radio for the regular season. But, he and I did the Pro Bowl together for Westwood One, and back in the day, 7, 8, 9 years ago, we used to do shows together on the College Channel on Sirius XM. So we go significantly back and have a little bit of a relationship and have developed that over the years. So I'm looking forward to hearing what but it's funny because you just said about his optimism, and one of the things Lincoln used to make fun of me about in the booth was like, I don't remember if we were in Buffalo. I don't know. One of the games in the last couple of years where the Raiders lost by, say, 17 or 24 points. And there'd be a point in like the late third quarter where, if the other team scores a touchdown, or the Raiders are going to try and, hey, this only makes it a 17-point game. There's 17 minutes left, 3 or 4 possessions. We got a chance. Yeah. And he would just look at me and breaks. He'd be like, what are you talking about? So it's good to know that Kirk and I are going to have the same ridiculous optimism.
Well, and that's not a good thing. That's not a bad thing. It's just a thing, right? So, but I guess that's Raider fans are going to really look forward to hearing that in preseason, not only for the players, but for you in the broadcast booth, and for me trying to adapt to this new role with Raiders.com as well.
The cool thing about it, and by the way, we're all very excited for you.
Thank you.
You 100% deserve all these opportunities. But one of the cool things about this year is the optimism is legitimate. It's not just hopeful.
It's different.
You've got a coach who's won a Super Bowl, who's won a national championship, who deserves to be in a Hall of Fame somewhere and will be. You've got a quarterback who, at least statistically over the last 3 years since he became a full-time starter again after that 6 or 7 year gap, statistically is top 10 across the board. Completion percentage, completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns. So that comes with some credence. And, oh, by the way, they've worked together. You've got a stud superstar in Brock Bowers, who just broke the record for most catches by any rookie ever, and a guy in Ashton Genty who the expectations are through the roof. So on the offensive side, you've got legitimate optimism that you can score 24 points a game, which is a massive leap from the last few years. Right. And then on the defensive side, Patrick Graham's been stable.
Yeah.
And I know statistically points allowed last year was on the defense and it took a massive step back, but a lot of that's on the turnovers from the offense, which was towards the bottom of the league. So the optimism and hope for this year to be a year where we are competing for the playoffs is real.
Yeah, and that's a good transition to get into training camp, right? I've written on Raiders.com a couple of columns. I'm a columnist now for Raiders.com after, like I said, since 2005.
You're a talking head now, Paul. Look at you hosting a podcast.
I just play it on podcasts. And it's funny. We were talking earlier. I had to knock off some of the rust here because I hosted the late great NFL Nation ESPN's Preecast in 2014, 2015. I think my biggest interview on there was probably Brian Bosworth when he was going through the car wash in Bristol, promoting his 30 for 30. But I digress. This is interesting to me because I've written a column now for Raiders.com, and you can find it at Raiders.com. And it's basically saying how, you've heard this before.
Yeah.
You've heard the whole, this feels different. This feels real. And what's different to me about this, Jason, is that Pete Carroll has the pelts on the wall. He's won at the levels that he's been at, whether it was at USC, which I covered him for the LA Times. I was the backup USC football writer there, as well as the basketball writer. So I saw it firsthand. And then in Seattle, obviously, and he was 1 yard away from back-to-back Super Bowl titles. And Tom Brady, who is in this building as well, had a little something to do with that too. But that's what's different about this, is that it just feels real because there is an actual blueprint. There's an actual resume. It's not built on hope, and that's not taking a shot at previous coaches. It's not taking a shot at Antonio Pierce, who led with fire and brimstone and emotion. It's not the cold clinical analysis, the X's and O's of Josh McDaniels. This is kind of a little bit of a throwback.
Yeah.
And you see it in the locker room. You see it the way these guys are responding to things. And it takes us to our first topic of training camp is the defensive line. There's some things that have happened here with the release of Christian Wilkins, and it seems like they're not really missing a step in that room, in that defensive line room. And the way that I kind of look at it is, I go back to the Antonio Brown situation. How can you truly miss something you never really had? I mean, he did start the flash in that last game last year when he got hurt, but he only played 5 games. He was never really part of the program here in the offseason as he attempted to rehab or didn't come back from the injury for Pete Carroll and this staff. So from your perspective, how does this affect the defensive line going forward? And is it more of an opportunity?
I think part of the reason it feels like you're right. You can't really miss something you didn't have, and this staff didn't have it with Christian Wilkins because he was never able to, come back completely from the Jones fracture that he suffered in Denver last year. But I think from an outside perspective, and you start to be like, hey, this team's gonna have this, they're gonna have this, so they're gonna do that, and you kind of like feels like you lost it, right? Because you assumed you'd have it. But I last year, I never, even when Christian Wilkins was lost for the year, when you started to look at the parts of the team that were lacking, the defensive line to me was never the biggest problem.
Right.
Because Max Crosby, until he got hurt and he was battling an ankle injury week 2 or week 3 or whatever it was, and he missed. What was it? Cleveland. He missed his first ever game of his career, week 4, and then he came back, and then he missed the last 4 games on IR. But between Max and all the other pieces that were thought of as just other pieces, they played really well. Like Adam Butler's up into the last couple of years. Adam Butler has been a journeyman who's kind of been a rotational guy and just fits in. He's become a legitimate player on this defensive line, and he talked about this week about he wanted to prove it. He's been playing angry, and now he's earned a multi-year deal, and he deserves it. He had his best year of his career. He's not here right now or on the team this year, but John Jenkins here with the Raiders the last 2 years had career years in his mid-30s. And so you had parts, and now you've got young parts with those two guys, right? Jonah Laulu at the end of last year was flashed. You've got him. You've got some other guys who have opportunities, and you also get Malcolm Kuntz back, who, again, speaking of things you didn't have, you didn't have him last year, so we don't know
That's kind of a
what
bonus.
this defense would have been like had the guy who had 6 or 7 sacks the last 4 games of 2023 comes back. If he would have been with Max last year, we don't know. You assumed what it would have been, and now hopefully we get to see it as he comes back into form.
To me, kind of the big key there, obviously, it's the interior of the defense. It's the big ugly, so to speak, that have to stuff the run, stop things. And that's what I thought was interesting about Adam Butler when we spoke to him the other day in his press conference was he came back upset. And his exact
He's still upset.
He's still upset, and he should be because that's what got him. And he said he had to change his own mindset, which shows a maturity, which shows that he's in control of his own emotions, and he knows that he can only control himself.
Well, I've shared this story a lot over the last, 11 months, but we were in Orange County last year for training camp, and I think it was the first day the pads came on. Maybe it was the second day the pads came on. But I'm standing on the sideline with Eric. By the way, congratulations to Eric Allen, who gets inducted to the Hall of Fame this week. And talk about deserving, and another guy who helped with Lincoln to welcome me into this franchise. But anyway, EA and I were standing on the sideline, and we were on the defensive side. And for people who have never been at practice or training camp, the way that it works is when they come out and they break their huddle and they do those stretches, offense will go to one part of the sideline, defense goes to the other sideline, and then they start working on their drills. So EA and I were standing on the defensive side, and Adam Butler, something happened in a scrimmage play or a play where the lines were going at it, and he came over, and Max Crosby was all up on him about not giving effort. And it was early in that practice. And then the rest of that practice, nobody was better or more energetic or more after it than Adam Butler. And I feel like it carried on from July all the way through January.
And what's interesting about him is that he was always kind of seen as a pass rushing specialist defensive tackle. And as he said yesterday, he doesn't want to be. He doesn't want to just be a one down guy on the field. He wants to be an every down.
65. I don't have it in front of me, but I believe last year when I finished my charts for Week 18, I believe he had been on the field like 70% of the snaps, 75%, which is a lot. That's a lot for a defensive lineman. It's not Max Crosby, but it's a lot.
Right, and well, then the X factor for the defensive lineman,
Tyree Wilson.
There you go.
Yeah. He looked. By the way, did he get taller?
Or maybe he got some different cleats. They made him.
Well, maybe, but like he really. I mean, the features that got him drafted 7th overall. When Josh McDaniels and that crew was here to start their tenure. I mean, it's evident. It's always evident, but his body is just different. And I wonder how that translates now that he's going to be more consistent on the inside. He played some inside last year, too, or the last 2 years. But now consistently he's going to be more on the inside.
And that's the thing for him is that I guess you have to accept or fully embrace the role of being a jack of all trades, master of none, so to speak, or just say, no, I'm a jack of all trades. I can do whatever, whenever, however. There were times I saw him lining up over the center. Now, if you're a center and you look up and you see him standing over you.
He's 6'6", and I don't know what he weighs this year, but he looks leaner.
Yeah, and as everybody said, Patrick Graham said last year too. Well, number one, we had to get him quicker off the ball. Mm-hmm. So you get that done. You get just a little bit of nastiness in him, and then he already has all the athletic tools you could imagine. Pete Carroll said that himself, that he's a marvelous looking athlete. So if you get more,
that goes back, Paul. You and I were talking yesterday. Being Tuesday, you and I were talking about how the world of life works, and particularly in sports. But life's about expectations. Sports are about expectations. And when you're drafted 7th, if you have 4 sacks in a year, you failed.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that you are a failure, and I'm not saying he is a failure.
That's the perception.
But perception of, because if you're drafted 77th or 97th and you're contributing the way that he has, you're not a failure. You're a contributing factor.
Right.
But because of what he looks like, how he played at Texas Tech before he got hurt, people forget about the foot injury that cost him all of training camp his rookie year. Mm-hmm. Because it sounds like excuses. But this is only year 3.
Yeah.
Right? And so if year 3 you go from whatever it was, you are not labeled, you are getting better. Yeah. And now it's year 3, year 4. Malcolm Kuntz took a massive step in year 3. And if Tyree Wilson can take that massive step in year 3, forget about labels, then it's just that you're a great part of the defense.
So X factor being Tyree, I think the local boy making good story with Jonah Laulu on the interior, being a Las Vegas native. That's a great story there too. But when you go back, let's go back from the defense, from the defensive line. Let's go back one more level to the linebackers. Just a totally rebuilt core.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of fans are like, wait a minute, they were actually one of the strengths of the defense. Now you're bringing in all these guys. But you've got these veterans that are coming in here now, whether it's Devin White, Landon Roberts, Jermaine Pratt, who ended the Raiders season a couple years ago in the playoffs with we saw what happened there. Jamal Adams, a 3-time All-Pro safety under Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Now switching to kind of a will linebacker, very undersized will linebacker, but what intrigues you about this rebuilt linebacker room?
Well, let's start with E-Rob. And I know everyone's talking about Devin White and Jamal Adams, and we'll get to them in a second. But I want to start with E-Rob, as he said he wants to be called, when we were at minicamp in June, right? And he's sitting down with you and Amber and EA, and he's like, nobody calls me a Landon.
My bad.
But start with him, though, because when Robert Spillane came here, no one talked about that signing. Right. It wasn't a big contract. He had really only started a handful of games in Pittsburgh. And he proved that he belonged as a starter and was, to your point, strength. And he's up towards the top of the record books for tackles in a season, right? And he became a guy who intercepted passes. And really, with Max, the heartbeat of this defense, and now he's in New England, and we'll see him week 1. But same thing for Landon Roberts. Like, he was a consistent guy with Miami and then Pittsburgh, and now you hope that's the same case here. So you put him there as, hey, this is what we know we have. Yeah. We know what he's going to be, and he's going to be on the field a lot. Now you get to the questions about the other 2. And really it's the other 3 because it's Devin White, it's Pratt, and it's Jamal Adams, who when Jamal Adams was healthy, he is a Pro Bowl, first team, second team, All-Pro caliber, listed as safety. But how many safeties get 9 sacks in a season? Right? And he's that type of All-Pro guy who's better in the bottom half of the defense, being closer to the line of scrimmage. And Devin White, when he came into this league, top 10 pick, I think it was number 5 overall with Tampa Bay, same thing. Yeah. All-Pro, 9-10 sacks in a season. Leader of a Super Bowl defense type guy. And so he seems, and again, we'll see what happens when September 7th rolls along, but he seems like he's back to that. Now, we have to wait, right? The foot injury that cost him part of 23, the regime that did not extend his contract in Tampa Bay, the last year with Houston and Philadelphia, really 5 or 6 games, whatever he played. And Jamal Adams hasn't been healthy. I wrote it down in my charts, which I don't have in front of me, but I believe Jamal Adams has missed like 30-some games over the last 3 or 4 years, right? Just a massive number. Yeah. So you have to hope those guys are healthy. But if those guys are healthy, the playmakers on this defense and where they fit, a couple years older, but maybe they're ready to roll.
And that's the thing. It's not necessarily built on hope so much as built on previous resumes. And with Jamal Adams,
but health is hope.
Health is hope.
Health is hope.
Like Lincoln Kennedy says, you can't make the club in the tub. And as everybody else says, availability is the best ability.
That was one of your chapters, right?
I believe so. I got to look it up.
Is it chapter 7?
But Jamal Adams, some stats here. 3-time All-Pro, 1 time under Pete Carroll. In 2020, his first season under Pete in Seattle, 9.5 sacks, a defensive back record, 11 tackles for loss, 14 quarterback hits, 83 tackles, 59 of which were solo. He's had 9 or more tackles for a loss in each of his first 4 seasons. Yeah. Devin White was selected one, again, kind of like we were talking earlier about if you're drafted at a certain spot, if you don't have these eye-popping stats, you're considered a bust, a failure, or whatever. Mm-hmm. One pick after Cleveland Ferrell, which is selected by the Raiders. Yeah. And again, is a very good NFL player, but at that spot, fans expect a lot more.
Second-round pick, you're fine.
Yeah, see, and then Devin White, he was second-team All-Pro in 2020, his second year, 9 sacks that year, 140 tackles. He talked yesterday about being right, not so much physically, but mentally. Yeah. And if you're not right mentally, if you're not comfortable, if you're not happy, then everything else just kind of falls by the wayside.
I think Tashawn Reed, our buddy at The Athletic, wrote about this on Tuesday about Devin White, who talked a little bit at the press conference, his turn when he met with the media on Tuesday after practice, about his father passing away either before the 2023 season or during the 2023 season. But it's deeper than that. He was sharing his story about his dad being incarcerated when he was young. They didn't have a relationship. Then he was out of prison, and they built a relationship, but then they had odds again. And then,
and then he was gone.
And then he was gone and passed away. And so he talked a little bit about that. That's the mental aspect you're talking about. And you can check out Tashawn's article in The Athletic a little bit more in depth. And then you have the foot injury. And then he talked about, he and his mom talked. He said, I thought about walking away from football. Yeah. I'd won a Super Bowl. I'd been All-Pro. I'd made some money. I took care of my family. And now, but he doesn't want that. He said, Pete Carroll joked he's back, and Devin White joked, "Where's he been?"
And in the third person too.
Yeah, in the third person. It was really played off really well, and it feels weird to say this because he's like 28.
Yeah,
but he's old, quote unquote. He's not. He's just experienced, I guess, in the realm of the NFL.
Yeah. So when we talk about the linebackers, we talk about the playmakers there, we got to go back now to the secondary, which, again, is kind of reimagined. And I'm not going to say Legion of Boom 2.0, but there's some strands of DNA in there from what Pete did in Seattle, especially when you see how big, long, and rangy his cornerbacks are.
Well, and it makes you wonder, because I think a lot of Raider Nation has been texting in, tweeting in, they've been sharing their thoughts about how much they liked Jacorian Bennett last year. Yeah. And he was really good. Like Jacorian, before he had the shoulder injury, had gone from his rookie year as a 4th-round pick, where he struggled a little bit. He started the year and then got benched. Whereas last year, he was awesome out of the gates and probably was playing like a top 15 cornerback in the NFL, top 20 cornerback. And then he suffered the shoulder injury and then was out for the year. But he doesn't have that frame that you think of when you think of a Richard Sherman and the guys in Seattle, a Reek Woolen, who, I mean, he's a different breed anyway. But like, when you start looking at some of the guys, your Eric Stokes, your Darian Porter, your DeCam Richardson, you start looking at Pete talked about JT Woods, who
there's a profile. There.
Yeah, there's a long, lengthy, tall, 6'1", 6'2" profile, and Coach Carroll talked about that a little bit yesterday. And Jacorian Bennett doesn't fit that, so that doesn't mean it just means he's going to have to battle it because if they're looking at a different size, and we'll see. But Jacorian Bennett earned it last year. He's going to have to earn it again. But if he's your depth, let's put it this way. If what Jacorian Bennett we saw last year in the first half of the season before he got hurt is your quote-unquote depth, I think you got to feel good about the cornerback room.
Yeah, and especially if you would think as being a shorter corner, okay, we'll throw him in the slot. He's not a slot cornerback.
He's not short, though. Like I think short is like 5'9".
Right, exactly. But then if you're throwing up Chin into the slot.
Well, he's 6'3".
Again, I mean, that just shows what they're doing defensively. Let's switch over real quick, though, to the offense, because I know, the top draft pick, running back, a lot of excitement there. This is not Marcus Allen in 1982. This is not Darren McFadden in 2008, I believe. This is a guy that, like Darren McFadden, was the runner-up for the Heisman Trophy. A lot of expectations for him.
Darren McFadden was robbed, by the way.
Oh, I like it.
I don't remember who won that. I just can tell you that I think Darren McFadden was robbed.
Okay, we're going to have to look this
up. Was that 2007 Heisman Trophy?
We're going to look at
What year was Darren McFadden drafted in the first round by the Raiders?
I want to say 2008 because Jamarcus was 07.
So then 2007 Heisman Trophy would have been Tebow.
There you go.
Or was he 08? No, he won in 07 the year he didn't win. That's right. So Tebow and Chris Leak won the national championship in 2006. Yeah. 2007, Florida went like 8-4, and Tebow won the Heisman.
As a sophomore.
And McFadden was robbed. He was robbed. Because Arkansas was like 10-2 or 11-2, something like that.
And then Darren was like a 2-time runner-up.
Did you see that they're not retiring Darren's number at Arkansas? They're going to honor his number. So the two guys who are wearing 5, one offense, one defense at Arkansas, are going to have patches, McFadden patches. instead of retiring his number. I like that, by the way. I like a ring of honor as opposed to retiring the number.
I like that also.
Too many kids in college. You have to hit them.
But I'm going to quote an old movie here. Patches, we don't need no stinking patches. Ashton Genty.
Yeah.
What is a realistic, fair expectation for him this year?
Well, I mean, let's start with the fact that the Raiders had a historically bad running game last year.
Worse than the league.
Right. Worse than the league, but beyond that, right? So
I thought you were positive. What are you doing?
Well, I am. I'm about to spin it positive. I'm not spinning that positively, but I'm about to spin this positively because I think the expectation. I mean, let's put it this way: you've met my 8-year-old son, who's with us here, and he's big into fantasy. And by the way, when a couple of years ago he won the league, and he did it all by himself. And last year he was the runner-up.
Wow.
So, but my point in bringing that up is Ashton Genty is going first round in every fantasy draft. And so if you have a running back who's going first round in every fantasy draft, you're expecting something that is maybe unrealistic. But if you get that, right, then the sky's the limit for this offense. If Ashton Genty is – because if you're drafting a guy like that, say let's call it 8th, 9th, 10th in a fantasy draft, what you're thinking about is a guy who's going to have 12, 13, 1,400 yards, 400 or 500 yards receiving, and 12 or 13 touchdowns. And if you get that, you're going to have one of the greatest rookie seasons by a running back ever.
But it's also going to bite into and eat into what Brock Bowers does, what Jacoby Myers does.
Yeah, but it's about but that's now you're talking fantasy, Paul. This is about scoring points.
I got you. Okay.
But think about this. Like my first year as the play-by-play announcer of the Silver and Black, the Raiders scored plenty of points, but they couldn't stop anybody.
Sure.
If you go back to the 2022 season, 6-11 as it was, but it could have easily been 11-6 because you think about how many games this team blew leads: 20-0 Arizona, 17-0 Kansas City, 17-0 Jacksonville. They almost blew a 14-0 lead against the Patriots before the Chandler Jones play.
That's right.
And so that's how the whole year went. They could score points, they couldn't stop anybody. Then 2 years ago, they couldn't score points, but the defense went from low 20s to top 10. And then last year, put it all together, and they still couldn't score points. So if this year they go from scoring 17, 18 points a game to 23, 24, 25 points a game, which is probably top 15, right, middle part of the league, you got a team that's competing for the playoffs.
And you also have a young nucleus now with the draft picks that they had with Jack Besh and Dante Thornton as receivers. You got Besh is just a big physical guy that they could put in the slot.
Dante was sitting here, by the way, with Vince on Upon Further or the training camp podcast, and Dante was like, everyone calls me Deontay. My brother's name is Deontay. It's spelled the same, but the apostrophe is in a different spot.
Okay, Dante.
Yeah. So his apostrophe is after the T, right?
Yeah.
His brother is after the D. He's also one of 5. He's got 2 other brothers.
Yeah, I saw the Thornton. I'm the old school baseball writer. Me thought of Andre Thornton from the Cleveland baseball team back in the 70s and 80s. But
did Andre have an apostrophe?
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I don't. At least it wasn't on his Topps card.
Me. I was born in '83.
Oh, dude.
Mike Henneman and Frank. Whatever. Continue.
I was in 8th grade, '83, and that was the year the Raiders won the Super Bowl.
That's right.
So that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, yeah. There you go.
What do you like about those 3 rookies in particular, and what can this offense look like with Geno Smith under Chip Kelly? We've seen a lot of 12 personnel.
Yeah.
And I know we're not breaking state secrets here. Fans are out there seeing it as well.
Yeah. Well, we saw a lot of it last year too.
Yeah. But under this new regime, what can this offense look like? And we'll start to wrap up things.
So remember, last year going into training camp, Luke Getsy was the offensive coordinator, and I know he got fired midway through the season. But we talked about having 2 tight ends, and you talked about last year. I think we would sit in this very studio and say what a benefit that could have been. Because, again, we didn't know the personal things that Michael Mayer would go through and the time away he would have. But you think about a second-round draft pick 2 years ago. You bring in Brock Bowers, and how awesome is it going to be to get both those guys on the field at the same time? And now fast forward that to this year, and I think you can say the same thing. But you know that Brock Bowers is a different level. And if Mike can get back to the guy that broke the records at Notre Dame for most catches in 3 years, at least from a tight end and a Mackey Award winner, and you put those 2 guys, and then you bring in a guy like Ian Thomas, who has athletic ability but has been known in Carolina as more of a blocking tight end. You've got a great nucleus with those 3 guys. But you asked about the rookies. Yeah. You got Ashton Genty, Dante Thornton, and Jack Besh, and I think the cool thing about all 3 of those is they do something very different, right? We put Ashton to the side, obviously. Dante Thornton is an explosive receiver. Very explosive.
Nice 65-yard bomb, too, early in the first day.
Yeah. But he's tall. He's fast. He's got a great catch radius. And you know, I think he's playing with the chip too, because everyone wants to knock the fact that they're like, well, he can't run a route tree. And he's like, what are you talking about? I've running route tree since I was 12.
Exactly.
Like, you know, and he's out to prove that. Jack Bash is a guy who's got incredible hands. He's, you know, a physical blocker, which if you're going to run the football like Chip Kelly wants to, your receivers better block, which we've seen Jacoby Myers do.
Yeah.
And I think also we're forgetting about Trey Tucker.
Yeah.
You know, Trey's just in his third year. He's a third-round pick. He is a guy who can be explosive too. But you put him in that fold too. Again, I know a lot of people want to knock the receiver room and say, hey, why aren't they going out and signing a veteran? And maybe we will. I have no idea. But I don't think it's as far away from being successful of a room as people think it is.
And that's what's so exciting about training camp, right? Just to see how they put all these things together. There's been 6 practices, 3 in pads, or 2 in pads. And they're on a day off, and before we know it, the season is going to be here, and they have an open practice for the fans at
Saturday.
Allegiant Stadium.
Well, and here too at the headquarters.
Yeah, headquarters. Yeah, and whenever those are open, we'll let people know on Raiders.com to register and come on in. First come, first serve here at the facility. But a lot of positive things happening, and if you can't be positive at this time of the year, Jason, I don't know when you can be, but like I said, you're always positive about it, so it's going to be fun to listen to you this year. And again, your son Noah being 8 years old and running fantasy leagues. I mean, when I was 7, I was crying
because running fantasy leagues.
He's winning them, so he's running them because he's winning them. That's what
I don't know if it's legal to have an 8-year-old commissioner. But his old travel baseball coach is the one who's allowing. But it's cool. You know, it is fun though. And I used to host fantasy shows with CBSSports.com for a few years, and you know, it's funny because I didn't like fantasy. I was the host of the show, and I enjoyed the people I worked with. Yeah. Chad Ochocinco was one of our analysts. And it was really fun. And the guys I worked with were incredible. Dave Richard and Jamie Eisenberg, and they're so fun to be around. But like the least favorite words of someone would say to me was like, "Hey, let me tell you who's on my fantasy team." And the reason it was the least favorite thing was because like, dude, you got 7 fantasy teams. Yeah. You can't tell me who's on your fantasy team, but with him and his friends, they have one. And that's fun.
That's what I'm saying. When I was 7, 8 years old, I was still wiping the tears out of my eyes from Reggie Jackson hitting 3 home runs against my Dodgers in the '77 World Series. But and I stay away from fantasy. It's the same thing. I get texts from friends asking, "Hey, so how's so and so looking? How's Ashton Genty looking?" I'm like, "Well, here's a picture of him signing autographs. That's how he looks to me." I'm not giving any advice on fantasy.
That's right.
I just say no. So just looking forward to getting this thing going. You and Kirk in the booth. I'm going to be writing on .com, joining you on the radio at times and different shows. So we're kicking this thing off. It's real. It's legit.
Yep.
And it just feels different.
It does.
So J-Rock.
We
got Ad Rock from the Beastie Boys, J-Rock with Raiders.
Well, if it doesn't work out, I'll play the old hits. We'll spin it on the radio.
And there's a lot of them. Thanks for joining, everybody. Once again, for Jason Horowitz, I am Paul Gutierrez. This has been the newest edition, Rated PG. Let's call it that. Rated PG version of Upon Further Review. Yeah. See you next time.